Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into a topic that has been buzzing across forums, online communities, and among firearm enthusiasts, the possibility of a brand new Glock generation. People are already speculating about what the Glock Gen 6 might look like, and more importantly, when it could be released. Glock has built a reputation for moving carefully, refining rather than reinventing, and sticking to a formula that has worked for decades. But that hasn't stopped fans and critics alike from debating what the next big step might be. So, in this discussion, we're going to cover a few key things. First, we'll take a look back at Glock's history, how each generation has arrived, what has changed, and what has stayed almost exactly the same. Then we'll look at why Glock tends to move slowly when introducing new features. After that, we'll get into the fun part, analyzing what Gen 6 might bring to the table, from slide serrations to optic systems to magazines. Along the way, I'll share what I personally think would make the most sense, and also what I'd like to see even if Glock doesn't actually go in that direction. By the end, we'll have a good sense of whether Gen 6 is coming soon and what it could look like. To understand where Glock might be going, it helps to see where they've been. Glock's history isn't just about one model after another. It's a story of how a polymer-framed pistol from Austria managed to become the most widely used handgun in the world. The very first Glock, the Glock 17, was unveiled in 1982. At the time, the idea of a plastic gun made people skeptical. Traditionalists insisted a real firearm had to be all steel. Yet the Austrian military saw potential and adopted 25,000 of them. What people thought would be flimsy turned out to be durable, lightweight, and extremely reliable. That first Glock changed the game and started a wave that eventually influenced almost every other manufacturer. About 6 years later came Gen 2. It wasn't a radical change. Glock rarely does radical changes, but instead offered refinements like checkering and serrations on the front strap. This made the grip a bit more secure, particularly for law enforcement users. By this point, Glocks were spreading worldwide, showing up in police holsters everywhere. A decade later, Glock launched Gen 3. This generation added the accessory rail, which became important for attaching lights and lasers. It also introduced finger grooves on the grip and a slightly different polymer frame. Many people still carry Gen 3 pistols today, and aftermarket support for this generation remains enormous. After 12 years, Gen 4 arrived. This was one of the biggest steps forward in Glock's history. Gen 4 pistols introduced a dual recoil spring assembly, which reduced felt recoil and improved durability. They also offered interchangeable backstraps, giving shooters the ability to adjust grip size. Small things like a larger reversible magazine release were added too. For many people, Gen 4 was the first Glock that felt customizable out of the box. Fast forward another 7 years and we reached Gen 5. This was heavily influenced by the FBI. Before Gen 5 officially launched, the FBI had requested changes in their own special versions, the Glock 17M and 19M. Those requests included removing the finger grooves, improving the finish, refining the barrel, and adding ambidextrous slide-stop levers. Glock realized those changes were popular and carried them forward into the Gen 5 series. Later, MOS modular optic system versions became available, allowing shooters to mount red dots with adapter plates. Gen 5 also gave us the Glock 19A, a crossover model built for the U.S. Army trials, which ultimately went to Sig Sauer's P320. Even though Glock lost that contract, the 19X became a huge commercial success. Looking at this history, a pattern emerges. Each generation arrives roughly every 7 to 12 years. None of them reinvent the Glock formula, but each one polishes it, new textures, new internals, small but meaningful ergonomic upgrades. That pattern is exactly why speculation about Gen 6 is so intense right now. It has been more than 7 years since Gen 5 debuted, which means we are right on schedule for Glock to introduce something new. Now, before we speculate about Gen 6, it's important to understand Glock's philosophy. Glock has always been cautious with change. The reason is simple. Their pistols are used by militaries and law enforcement agencies around the world. If Glock were to completely redesign a gun every few years, those agencies would need to retrain thousands of people, rewrite manuals, and requalify their officers. That's expensive and risky. By keeping the guns very similar from one generation to the next, Glock ensures that muscle memory transfers over and training costs stay low. There's another reason: reliability. The Glock formula is already one of the most trusted in the industry. Changing too much could introduce new problems, so instead, Glock focuses on incremental refinements. They fix small issues, they listen to agency requests, and they polish features that already work. That's why so many people joke that every Glock looks the same. In a way, that's true, but it's also the key to Glock's dominance. With the history and Glock's conservative philosophy in mind, let's start piecing together what we might expect from the Gen 6. The safe bet is that it will look very similar to the Gen 5. Glock is unlikely to release something radically different, but the community has been buzzing with ideas about what might be tweaked, starting with the front end of the pistol. The muzzle of current Glock models is efficient and effective, so most predictions say it will remain largely unchanged. The profile already supports durability and good holstering. Still, there's chatter about possible refinements around the nose for smoother reholstering, especially for duty holsters. It wouldn't be surprising if Glock sharpened those small details without reworking the entire slide. Gen 5 models already introduced front serrations, and those will almost certainly stay. Some shooters want to see top serrations as well, inspired by custom shops and companies like CZ. Top serrations can reduce slide weight and allow extra grip for press checks. But realistically, Glock may keep things simple. Perhaps a special variant of the Gen 6 could experiment with them, but a standard lineup will likely remain conservative. When it comes to accessory rails, consistency is key. Glock's rail dimensions are already supported by a massive aftermarket lights lasers, and training accessories are built specifically for this setup. Changing the rail would alienate both customers and manufacturers, so expect the Gen 6 rail to stay exactly the same. Custom shops often shave or stipple the frame area near the takedown lever to create what's known as a gas pedal. This allows the shooter's support hand thumb to press down, controlling muzzle rise. It works surprisingly well. Would Glock officially integrate such a feature? It's possible, but not guaranteed. Glock values strength and consistency, and altering frame geometry is always a risk. Still, if there's one area on the frame that might see a subtle redesign, the gas pedal area is a candidate. Even a small texture change here could make a big difference in how controllable the pistol feels. So up front, Gen 6 changes will probably be subtle, slightly smoother muzzle contours, proven serrations, and maybe minor tweaks around the gas pedal. Nothing radical, but small details that shooters notice once they start putting rounds downrange. Moving back from the front of the gun, let's talk about the parts of the Glock that shooters interact with the most: triggers, controls, and magazines. This is where speculation really heats up. Though again, the likely outcome is refinement rather than reinvention. The safe action trigger has been Glock's hallmark for decades. It's reliable, consistent, and trusted by agencies worldwide. For that reason, most expect the Gen 6 to keep it essentially unchanged. Glock may polish internal geometry to smooth the break, but a major redesign is unlikely. The reason is simple: training. If the trigger suddenly felt completely different, police and military users would need retraining. That's not Glock's style. They'll keep it familiar. A raised or more pronounced slide stop has been requested by agencies like the FBI, and Glock has already responded in models like the 34. It wouldn't be surprising to see a higher-profile ambidextrous slide release become standard on Gen 6. This would be a small but practical improvement that most shooters would welcome. The MOS system has been a big step for Glock, but it isn't perfect. Shooters often complain that the plates sit too high and sometimes flex under stress. Glock knows this and has been experimenting with collaborations like the Aimpoint A-Cut system. The big question is whether Gen 6 will refine MOS into something sturdier or even create a direct mounting option. That would make Glock competitive with newer designs like the Springfield Echelon or the Ruger RX series. Expect Glock to stick with the MOS branding, but with improved plates or a proprietary mounting system that feels more secure. This is a sore spot. Glock still ships most models with basic plastic sights, even though many shooters immediately replace them. Realistically, Gen 6 will probably continue the tradition, since Glock knows aftermarket sights are a thriving industry. But from a community perspective, upgraded factory sights, metal 3-dot options would be a huge win. Over the years, Glock has refined grip texturing gradually. The square pattern we see today is functional and consistent. Don't expect a radical redesign here. At most, the texture might become slightly more aggressive for better control. The frame itself will remain familiar. Perhaps the biggest opportunity lies here. Compact models like the Glock 43 and 43X have faced criticism for low capacity. Aftermarket companies like Shield Arms have already increased capacity by 50% with steel mags. It seems inevitable that Glock will step up and offer improved capacity for Gen 6. If they do, it will instantly make their Slimline pistols more competitive in the concealed carry market. No discussion of the future would be complete without looking at Glock's Slimline pistols, especially the Glock 43 and 43X. These models were designed for concealed carry, but they've always been controversial when it comes to capacity. The Glock 43 with its 6-round magazine feels outdated by modern standards. Even the 43X, which stretches the grip to allow 10 rounds, struggles to compete with rivals that offer more capacity in a similar footprint. The community has made its opinion clear: 6 or 10 rounds simply isn't enough anymore. Aftermarket solutions like the Shield Arms S15 magazine have shown what's possible, fitting 15 rounds into the 43X platform without changing the pistol's dimensions dramatically. These magazines prove the point that Glock could deliver higher capacity if they wanted to. The demand is real, and the technology is proven. So will Gen 6 bring improvements for the 43 and 43X, it seems likely. Glock has the opportunity to address one of the most common complaints while keeping the Slimline models competitive. If Gen 6 includes redesigned magazines with higher capacity while maintaining Glock's legendary reliability, it would be one of the most celebrated upgrades of the new generation. Another wildcard in this conversation is the Glock 46. Originally developed for the German police, this model introduced a rotating barrel design. It was a departure from the traditional Glock system, and while it never reached the US market widely, it drew a lot of curiosity. The main issue was the extremely heavy trigger, reportedly around 12 pounds, which was requested by German authorities to reduce negligent discharges. What if Glock decided to bring a refined version of the 46 to other markets as part of the Gen 6 lineup? A rotating barrel could change the shooting experience, potentially reducing recoil and improving accuracy. If Glock paired that system with a standard trigger pull weight around 4.5 to 5 pounds, it could offer something new without straying too far from Glock's DNA. It's not guaranteed, but the existence of the Glock 46 shows that Glock is willing to experiment when large contracts are on the line. Gen 6 could be an opportunity to bring some of that experimentation to the wider public. While we've covered the likely refinements, it's also fun to talk about what many of us would like to see, even if Glock doesn't go that far. At the top of the list is a refined recoil spring assembly. Glock's current system is excellent, but there are aftermarket options that feel smoother and more balanced. Incorporating that refinement from the factory would be a huge plus. Another dream feature would be a true FCU fire control unit system similar to SIG's P320. This would open the door to modularity, letting shooters swap frames without going through an FFL. It's unlikely, but it would be revolutionary. Other simple wishes include direct optic mounting factory metal sights and a more pronounced slide stop lever. These are small changes, but they would give Gen 6 a premium feel right out of the box while staying true to Glock's reputation for reliability. Based on Glock's history, new generations appear every 7 to 12 years. Gen 1 arrived in 1982, Gen 2 in 1988, Gen 3 in 1998, Gen 4 in 2010, and Gen 5 in 2017. That means we're right in the window for Gen 6. If Glock sticks to the pattern, a release in 2025, 2026, or 2027 seems very likely. Nothing has been officially announced, but the timing lines up perfectly. The industry is buzzing with speculation, and every year that passes increases the expectation that Glock will unveil the next chapter soon. So what can we realistically expect from the Glock Gen 6? If history is any guide, it will look and feel very familiar to the Gen 5. The differences will be small but meaningful: refined optics, mounting slightly better ergonomics, maybe improved magazine capacity for slimline models, and subtle tweaks to controls. For most shooters, those changes will be enough to keep Glock competitive while preserving the reliability and simplicity that made the brand famous in the first place. That's my breakdown of where Glock has been, where it stands, and where it could go next. But now I'd like to hear from you. Do you agree with these predictions? What features do you want to see in Gen 6? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going.